Good evening. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our second Rise for Freedom training. I'm Caden. I'm an organizer with Public Citizen, and it is so great to see over 500 and counting of you all on tonight's call. Tonight, we're going to be talking about building to a critical mass locally and strategic outreach campaigns. And you'll learn all about what that means in a bit. But in the meantime, just want to acknowledge a few folks from the chat. If you haven't already, please feel free to put your name, your pronouns, where you're calling in from in the chat. I see Christina from Michigan. I see Suzanne from California, from Hanson, California. I see wow, this chat's moving so quick. Let's see, Chris and Anna from Washington State, it looks like. Got some folks from Maryland, from Florida, all over the place. It's so great to see what appears to be people from all 50 states. I'm based out of DC. I don't know if there's any other folks who are also calling in from DC here. Shout out in the chat if you are. Folks from Minnesota. Thank you all so much for joining. I'll quickly dive into the icebreaker that we have for tonight. So if you'll remember last week, we used Mentimeter, and that was the tool, the engaging tool that we used to answer the icebreaker question that we had. So today's icebreaker question is a little different. Obviously, we had the hands-off mobilization over the past weekend on Saturday. And so if you're new to Mentimeter, if you weren't here last week, I will explain how to use Mentimeter. But let's definitely take this opportunity to get acquainted with your sound settings, with Mentimeter, and then we'll dive into our icebreaker. And our icebreaker today is, if you went to a hands-off mobilization, in 1 or 2 words, describe how you felt being there. And no worries if you weren't able to go to one, because we'd still love to hear how you're feeling, seeing them on the news the past couple of days. These mobilizations have been making headlines. So definitely want to hear how folks are feeling. And if we go over to the next slide, can just explain some technical things. So for the icebreaker, if you're with other folks, either in person, over a Google Meet or FaceTime, please exit the audio for the call, and I'll show you just how to do that on the next slide in just a sec. But it's going to be the caret to the right of your audio or mute control, and then do the icebreaker with the people you're with. If you're in a big room, please do an introduction in maybe groups of 2 and 3, and then turn your sound back on and come back to this group here. And so I'll just show you real quick how to exit Zoom audio, so you're not hearing all the commentary that's going on the webinar while you're trying to do your icebreaker. So as London, who is sharing our slides tonight, thank you, London, can probably put her cursor around, you can see the bottom bar. And if you go to your bottom bar and then click on the little up arrow, the little caret right by the mute or microphone icon, then you can select up and click leave computer audio. And once you click that, it'll be as if you just joined the meeting, so you haven't connected your audio yet. And that way you won't hear any of the commentary that's going on for the meeting here during the few minutes that we're doing the icebreaker. And then when you're ready to join the audio back, just click the join audio button. It's going to be a green up arrow with a little headphone icon. But we are going to be taking 2 minutes for this icebreaker. So if we want to head over to the next slide, can really quickly show how to use Mentimeter. So Mentimeter we're using it for a word cloud tonight. And so basically, it allows us to see if you answer in 1 or 2 words what the most popular answers are. So would love for everyone to take their phones and scan the QR code on the screen. You can also go to menti.com and use code 5877-5748. That's 5877-5748. If you were here last week, this is a different code for this meeting, so make sure to use this one. And if somebody could paste that in the chat, that would be incredibly helpful. Thank you. But once you are on, you should be at the first slide of the Mentimeter that's got the question for tonight's icebreaker. So I'll give everyone a few seconds to scan the QR code or enter the code at menti.com. Again, it's 5877-5748. And then we'll head to the actual word cloud in just a second. Give everyone like 10 more seconds to do that. Awesome. Cool. All right, let's head over to the Mentimeter and begin answering tonight's icebreaker. Again, you can leave the Zoom audio, but please make sure to come back in 2 minutes or when the slide shifts. So feel free to leave the audio in the meantime. For those who are already entering, we already have over 100 responses. That's awesome. So after the hands-off mobilization, folks are feeling energized, hopeful, empowered, inspired, motivated. The word I remember using was momentum. I really felt a lot of momentum with these things because last time around when Trump was first president, there was a huge amount of momentum, a lot of resistance, a lot of folks in the streets resisting his first term as president. But this time around, we didn't see as much of that momentum during the first few days of his administration. It took a while for it to build up, but when it built up big. And we obviously had crazy amounts of mobilization on April 5th, last Saturday. And just some stats, some report backs on how much mobilization we had. We had over 5.3 million Americans in the streets, and folks all over the globe, including in places like Berlin, in Paris, I think even in Australia and Canada as well. There were mobilizations across the world in support of resisting autocracy here in America, resisting the oligarchy, the Trump, Musk corporate oligarchy that's taking shape here, and standing up for federal workers, standing up for our social services and for our democracy. So yeah, 5.3 million people across 1,300 actions and mobilizations across the country. That's just incredible to think about. And I do really want to take a quick moment to shout out a few of the folks on this call tonight, specifically Sophie and London, who have been organizing from Public Citizens team and who have done so much to contact hosts and pull many of these mobilizations together. So would love some love for them in the chat. Again, Sophie and London have been working so hard over the past few weeks to make hands off possible. So show some love for them in the chat. And then checking back here on the word cloud, people feel connected. Oh, that's one that's coming up. They feel community. They feel powerful. We should feel powerful. We mobilized 5.3 million people. That's powerful. And folks feel energized. They feel hopeful. This is a huge shift from a lot of the words I was hearing right after the election. So it's so reassuring and a little heartwarming to know that folks' attitudes have taken a 180 since November 5th, between November 5th and April 5th. I'm seeing proud is becoming bigger and bigger. You should feel proud. This last Saturday was incredible. And we'll speak to a May Day action that folks can go to, where hopefully we can also get incredible turnout. Let's see, inspired, proud, powerful, excited for the next mobilization. I hope we'll talk about that in just a bit. We'll give about 30 more seconds for folks to wrap up their responses, seeing over 460 responses right now. Obviously we have like 700 folks on the call. So for the other 300, take a moment to respond to the icebreaker, 1 or 2 words, how you're feeling after last Saturday, after the hands-off mobilization on April 5th. Put it in the Mentimeter. Again, it's menti.com. Use code 5877-5748. We'll give it short time, about 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Awesome. Just doing a last look at this. Empowered, hopeful, energized, powerful, motivated, connected, feeling community. Those seem to be a lot of the top feelings that folks are resonating with after the hands-off mobilization. So thanks everyone for taking time to answer this icebreaker. If you are audio off right now, please come back, join on your audio. Again, it's the green up arrow with the headset icon. Just take a moment to join if you're in a group. And again, thanks for putting in that icebreaker. So great to see so much more hope in the air than we did just a few weeks or months ago. Awesome. So moving on, wanted to take a quick moment to acknowledge our partners, our Rise for Freedom Coalition partners. So on some of the core partners to shout out tonight, we have Public Citizen, Women's March, the League of Women Voters, the League of Conservation Voters, which just want to shout them out for bringing in so many attendees over the past week. And then also the Declaration for American Democracy Coalition. Thank you all so much. And to all of our other partners on the call tonight in the coalition, thanks for all that you've been doing to mobilize people to these trainings, to mobilize people to hands-off protests if you've done that. Just really appreciate your partnership and all that partners have thrown down to make this possible. So thank you. And then next slide, please. So quick overview of tonight's agenda. We will have speakers. We will review the timeline, the goals, and the ethos of the Rise for Freedom trainings. Again, this is just going to be a quick review. So if you've already heard it before, it won't take long, I promise. We'll do a quick update on the SAVE Act. Today was a big day for the SAVE Act. So excited to give a report back on the vote and how that went. And then we'll speak to the May Day mobilization on May 1st. We'll go into the digital hygiene tip, and then we'll jump into the core content of tonight's training, which is building to a critical mass locally. And so it's a big outreach training. And so if time allows, we'll wrap up with the Q&A at the end. Quick note, if you want to rename yourself, you can right-click your icon, rename yourself on Zoom, and then captioning is available. To turn on live transcriptions, you can go to the bottom bar of your Zoom. You can click More or CC, and then Captions, and then Show Captions. Again, instructions are on the slide if you want to use captions tonight. So next slide, please. And somebody could paste the captioning instructions in the chat. That'd be fantastic. Thank you. So a very quick ethos recap. Next slide, please. So the way these trainings are formatted, we're creating safe spaces for communities to gather, to learn, strategize, and organize about how to resist autocracy and Project 2025. And so hosts can create welcoming training spaces in their living rooms, in their common areas, or in their college classrooms if they're students. If you are a student on tonight's call, definitely encourage you to fill out the host form. Let's get some more young people on these calls as well. But how this really differs from a lot of other trainings is that, usually you have folks talking at you for 2 hours, and you might absorb some of it, but not the entirety. And what we're really trying to create is an engaging, organizing, and learning space here. And so by having hosts gather folks in their living rooms, in their common areas, and classrooms, you're able to break out and build trust and build organizing power in your groups that you've gathered, and then together engage and learn on the content for these trainings. So next slide, please. We'll quickly do a timeline review. So last week we had How Did We Get Here? Intro to Organizing Under Creeping Autocracy. Tonight is Building to a Critical Mass Locally. So it's an outreach training. Next week, April 17th on Thursday, we have How to Talk to People You Might Disagree With. On April 24th, we have Harnessing Our Power to End Political Violence and Repression. On May 1st, we have Mutual Aid Structures for Stronger Local Organizing. On May 8th, we have De-Escalation and Advanced Strategic Organizing Skills. And on Thursday, May 15th, we have Advanced Organizing Skills, and we'll vote on possible topics. So again, this is an updated timeline. If you weren't here last week, then the timeline might be very slightly different. But again, a lot of the same content that is across all of them. You can also go to rise4 freedom.org to check out the timeline as well. So we have one on the front page of the website. Next slide, please. Awesome. So quick review of our ethos. We're just going to go through these real quick. We are trying to be a big tent space here. So progressives through conservatives are welcome as participants and presenters on these trainings, provided that we're united in support of a democratic republic and stopping Trump's power grab. We are being welcoming, love-centered, joyful, and connection-focused in person. And we're in person at our gatherings for each training as much as possible. We're continuously outreaching and building capacity and recruitment is essential to our movement, to these trainings. We can't possibly win without it. So that's why we have these outreach trainings every single week, so folks can build capacity, potentially bring more people to these trainings to learn how we resist autocracy, and then also build local organizing power for when there are actions that come up. And then we're also calling in our partners or hosts privately if they use othering or unwelcoming language. So again, we're not calling out, but calling in and really trying to create create that inclusive organizing and training space. Next slide, please. And then some important points on the ethos. We are nonviolent. We never support violent tactics. There is a universe of nonviolent direct action tactics, which are part of the response to autocratic moves and democratic backsliding around the world. These are part of the story of how different countries and people have been able to protect or move towards democracy. There are so many different examples of nonviolent resistance movements that have been incredibly successful. And so on these calls, we're not going to ask anyone to break the law, nor will we tell attendees how to do those nonviolent direct action tactics. And lastly, our Rise for Freedom trainings are nonpartisan. So we do not partner with local party groups. So if you're maybe part of a local chapter of a political party and you requested to partner or filled the partner form and you haven't heard back from us, that's why. That's because these are all C3 and nonpartisan. So just a quick note on that. And then next slide, please. Awesome. So we're going to jump into a quick poll. And so as soon as that's launched, the poll is, are you hosting or will host, or will you help a friend host one or more Rise for Freedom trainings over the coming weeks? And so we'll take a quick moment to answer that. It's been launched.
Yep.
Almost.
The possible answers are yes, I'm hosting one as we speak. Yes, I'm filling out the host form, and look to the chat. There'll be the host form shared there shortly. I'm filling out the host form via the link in the chat because I want to host, and we will follow up with you if you answer any of these first 4 answers. Yes, but I need to find a venue. Maybe. We'll definitely follow up with you maybes and see how we can help. I can't commit right now, but I'm hosting or attending the April 19th events being planned by 5051, or the May 1st events that we're about to hear about that are going to be amazing and we're really excited for. Or I can't commit right now, and I'm doing the best I can, and we know that that's real too. So we've had almost 500 folks voting. We're going to make sure we get a nice solid majority voting here, and then we'll share these results with you all. We have almost 781 people on this call right now, and that's not even including the folks who are in the room around the country gathered together to do this training. So, all right, I'm going to end the poll, share the results. We've got 45 people hosting right now. Woo! That's awesome. Welcome and thank you. We've got 9 folks filling out the host form, 19 more folks looking for a venue, 129 people thinking about hosting. We will follow up with all of you. Thank you so much. And folks who are throwing down for the mobilization, almost 200 folks, and a bunch of folks doing what you can. We are all contributing in our way. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Akine, for the rundown on the poll. We'll go to the next slide. Awesome. So again, for folks who are interested in hosting, you can sign up at rise4freedom.org/host. We created that short link and that redirects to this host form where you can sign up for everyone who might want to host. And that allows you to invite folks every Thursday trainings that you want to host. And then the Mobilize for this Zoom training, you'll sign into personally every week. And so you can also list your events on Mobilize if you'd like, but for all folks who are hosting, you need to sign up using this host sign up form. Next slide, please. And some folks will post the host sign up form link in the chat. Okay, so an update on the SAVE Act. As I said, today was a big day on the SAVE Act. The House of Representatives voted 220 to 208 in favor of adopting the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act. It's misleadingly named. In fact, it is a voter suppression act that you might have heard of recently or from the news or from partner organizations who've been trying to amplify it as much on social media. Yeah, boo voter suppression. Thank you, whoever said that. This is a voter suppression measure and would immediately impact if passed by the Senate and signed into law, 21 million American citizens. It would prevent 21 million American citizens from voting. And the maximum estimates of how many folks this could impact is upwards of 65 million Americans. And so this is an incredible voter suppression measure, one of the largest in recent history. And we've been mobilizing so much across groups to defeat it. But unfortunately, it passed today in the House. And I just came from the Capitol earlier today. We were mobilizing youth and students to hit up all 26 members of Congress who were on edge about whether to vote in favor of it or not, and dropping by their offices and urging them to vote no, to protect our generation's right to vote, and especially to protect the right to vote of many folks who are targeted by the SAVE Act, including female voters, married voters, trans voters, Black, young, and naturalized voters. So these are all folks who will unfortunately suffer, because one of the SAVE Act's big provisions is it ends all online voter registration. It also forces all voters to have matching passports and birth certificates just to go to vote. And so for folks who maybe are living paycheck to paycheck, you can't afford a $160 passport just months out, and then also have to plan months out ahead of the election to make sure it arrives in time if it doesn't match your birth certificate. So this also effectively amounts to a poll tax on our most vulnerable communities. And also want to highlight that the SAVE Act wouldn't have been able to pass today without the help of 4 Democrats. And so going to shout out their names, didn't have the time to put their emails and phone numbers, but if you can find those and call up their offices and express how dissatisfied you are, feel free to. But Jared Golden from Maine, Mary Perez from Washington, Ed Case from Hawaii, and Henry Cuellar from Texas. They were 4 Democrats who voted in favor of this massive anti-voter and voter suppression measure. The SAVE Act now heads to the Senate, and we'll do everything in our power to defeat it there for sure. And so want to elevate some of the DFAD actions that are happening. So DFAD has a movement call on April 22nd, later this month at 7 p.m. Where we'll be kind of regrounding ourselves, reflecting on the SAVE Act vote in the House, and then strategizing how we're going to defeat this bad bill in the Senate. So again, that's on April 22nd. The Mobilize link is being posted in the chat, so please be sure to join the Declaration for American Democracy Coalition's movement call on April 22nd. The other thing you can do is take action with the League of Women Voters. And you can also, that link's also being posted in the chat and circulated. And the last thing that we really, really need your help to do is to call your senator and demand they vote no on the SAVE Act using the Declaration for American Democracy's call-in hotline. And that's 833-346-1779. Again, that's 833-346-1779. Take note of that number, and when you call it, it'll patch you through to your senator so you can urge them to vote no on the SAVE Act. Let's defeat this thing together. Let's protect voting rights, ensure the freedom to vote for all, and hopefully we get this thing in the Senate. So thank you so much. Next slide, please. Awesome. I will pass it over to Pablo to introduce our first speaker of the evening. Thank you, Pablo.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Pablo de Jesus. I'm the Executive Director of the Unitarian Universalists for Social Justice, and it's my sincere pleasure to introduce our first speaker. Jesse Sharkey is an American former school teacher and labor leader in Chicago, go Chi-Town. From 2010 to 2014, he was the vice president of the Chicago Teachers Union, Go Teachers. In October of 2014, he became the acting president of CTU after Karen Lewis stepped down as president due to illness. And then in May 2019, he and other members of the caucus of rank and file educators, were reelected to their leadership positions with approximately 2/3 of the vote, of the people's vote. Former President Sharkey chose not to extend or seek re-election in 2022 and endorsed his successor, current CTU President Stacey David Gates. And with that, I give you Jesse Sharkey. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pablo. Thank you, Caden, and to the folks at Public Citizens. It's really great to be on. I'm glad to be here. I want to talk to you guys about May 1st. May 1st is going to be a big mobilization this year. There's a website, maydaystrong.org, which people can check out for lots of information. There's toolkits online about organizing and a bunch of stuff that I'll talk about in a minute. But I just really want to start by explaining why May 1st. May 1 is a traditional day of protest. This goes back centuries. It was a spring holiday. It's when the hardships of winter were over. There was a warmth in the air. Traditionally, peasants or very poor agricultural workers used it as a day of protest, a day of jubilee, free from debt. It became a workers' holiday in the U.S. in 1886 when people called for a general strike for the 8-hour working day. And more recently, in 2006, immigrants used May 1st, May 1, 2006. Millions of immigrants marched across the country, Day Without an Immigrant, mass protests, to remind our bosses that we have the power to withhold our labor, and when we act together, we can really change society. In addition to those sort of traditional reasons, May 1st is also something which will, I don't know, there's a noise going on. Can other people hear that? Not sure what that is. The other thing that I just want to say is that it helps build on the momentum of April 5th. I don't think that we're going to simply just by having some big mobilizations sort of usher Trump out that way, but it sure does feel good to be turning the tides to counter our forces. That's very important. It's also connected to, May 1st is also connected to a network of local unions, community organizations, grassroots organizers. And then finally, May 1st is really about putting forward a vision of a better society. We're not simply trying to oppose what Trump and the billionaires are doing, but we're saying that we're basically saying that workers built this society. We know how to take care of each other, and we're not going to back down. We're going to keep fighting for our families, for rights and freedoms that propel opportunity and make life better for everyone. We want good quality public education. We want public accommodations. We want the things which we need in order to make our lives worth living and high quality for us and future generations. So that's why May 1st is important. Like I said, there's a network of unions around the country that are going to be organizing events, and we want people on this call to join us. To go on maydaystrong.org. If you there's a map you can call up. If there's an event already planned in your locale, city or town, please join it. You can sign up for it there. If there isn't an event already planned, please plan one. There's a link that you can push to put details in. We're having regular organizing calls. There's an organizing call on April 17th, which also you can check that out. And again, it's all on the website. But maydaystrong.org, and we really are very much looking forward to joining forces with the people who are already in motion and trying to make a really big, strong, united opposition that stands in solidarity and tries to take our country back. So that's all I've got, but thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you so much, Jesse Sharkey. We appreciate your presence here tonight. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Eric Johnson, Technology and Security Director for Corporate Accountability, to give us our digital hygiene tip. I don't know about you guys, but I've been learning plenty with Eric over the course of the training series, and I'm deeply appreciative of his attention and time.
Right. Thank you so much, Pablo. And it's great to see everybody here. So today's digital hygiene tip, I'm going to talk about some ways that we can secure our social media accounts. I'll start by saying that the only way to truly opt out of social media companies collecting data about you is to be completely anonymous online. Even if you don't have a social media account, more likely than not, companies like Meta, TikTok, and X have collected data about you, which is all to say that social media platforms have a profit-driven motive to collect as much data about you as possible. And because of that, the default settings on any of these platforms are almost always set to collect as much information and data about what you do, what you look at, and that can be shared out with lots of different people and organizations. And so that isn't great all the time, especially if you're in the advocacy space. So while social media does have its privacy risks, it also has its place as a really solid tool occasionally for movement building. So for that reason, I wanted to go over a few easy steps that you can take to limit the amount of data that's being collected and improve your overall privacy. The three priorities that I have listed here are what I think we should focus on today, which is to turn off or limit tracking and data collection by these different programs, taking a few steps to update the privacy settings that can limit the visibility of your online actions, and then taking a few steps to secure your accounts from being hacked and accessed by people who want to do malicious things with your accounts. And because we could spend a lot of time going through all of these settings that can be changed, we're going to walk through two examples today of how to limit tracking and restricting data collection on Facebook/Meta and on TikTok, sorry. And that should provide a sense of familiarity when you're going through and navigating other types of security settings. So if you go to the next slide, I'm going to walk through how to improve your security settings on Facebook/Meta. One of the good things about this is that if you use WhatsApp, Instagram, it's all relatively the same, and you can actually update your settings for all of those platforms because they're all owned by Meta in the same space. So you'll see here up in the top, we'll start on the left. You'll see there's a circle around what's a really small version of my face. If you click on that, that brings up the settings sort of like window. Click on settings and privacy. Then you'll see onto the right screen where it says there's an option for Privacy Center. You'll want to click on that. If you can go to the next slide, please. From here, you can access a bunch of different security settings. What I'm going to focus on today is how Meta and Facebook is connected to a whole bunch of other applications that you might not know about. And this is a good way to check in on that and close it out. So if you click on Manage Your Accounts, which you'll see is circled on the left, that will show you all of your Meta accounts. So you'll see Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook, all of them. And from there, you should be able to see on the right this example where you can see your activity off Meta technologies. That's essentially the bridge between Meta and everything else. So DoorDash, if you signed in with Meta on something else, like there's all these different ways that they get information from Meta to other companies, and you can see what's happening there. So if you go to the next slide, you'll have a couple options. You'll see the arrows pointing to the two places I want you to go to. One is to click on Clear Previous Activity. What that will do is it'll close it all out. So it'll disconnect you from all these different tracking and external applications that Meta is connected to. And then the second is if you click on Manage Future Activity, you can prevent those connections from happening in the future. So those are the two steps you should go through here. We'll go one more slide that we'll spend on Meta before we switch to something else. So if you're back on that settings menu, there's two additional steps that I think everyone should do. And I'll share out resources on how to do this. So if you, I don't expect people to be following along that quickly. If you click on Ad Preferences here, this is what Meta and Facebook and all these companies exist for, is ad shares. That's like ad revenue is how they make money. What you can do is you can turn off all tracking and specified ad targeting by clicking on Ad Preferences and just turning everything off. Similarly, if you go to manage contacts on the right, you see there's an arrow pointed to that. Here, I would suggest turning off all connections of syncing contacts. By default, if you sign into Facebook, it's going to ask you in a really quick way, like, can we sync with all of your contacts of your email, of your phone? And if you say yes, they're going to know who you talk to and can even encourage them to find you on Meta and et cetera. And it's this exponential data nightmare. So there's a lot more that you can do on Facebook, Meta, Instagram, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to switch over to TikTok now. So if we go to the next screen, and here we're using our phones because that's primarily how people use TikTok, but the settings are kind of the same regardless if you're on a phone or on a computer. you'll get to your settings by clicking on the three little lines up at the top right. It's called a hamburger menu because it kind of looks like a hamburger. Click on that and you'll see this option for settings and privacy. This again is going to be your sort of portal into adjusting all the different things that you want to do with your settings on the TikTok app. So if you go to the next slide, from here, probably the most important thing here is to mute ads again. The ads are the profit motivator for TikTok and other platforms. So if you go into ads, which you may have to scroll down for, I think they make it harder for you than it appears here. It's further down. Then it'll open up this menu and just turn off personalized ads. That does mean you're going to get some kind of strange ads that are not targeted to you. Like it might be like, why am I getting ads about, I don't know, something ridiculous that you have no interest in? To that end, you can go into mute advertisers, especially ones if people are like advertising you products that you are actually against, or if you get ads from the Trump administration or other similar kind of entities, you can go into mute advertisers and just turn those off. So that gives you a lot more control over how you are interfacing, and vice versa. TikTok, Meta are sharing your information out with other companies, private companies, other data collection firms, all of that. So this ideally is to give you a sense of how you adjust your settings. If you go to the next slide, I'm not going to go through how to do these step by step, but I will send out some links. The next thing I would focus on with all of your apps, whether it's X, Meta, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever, is make your programs as private as possible. So for that, it's like, unless there's a reason that you want everybody in the world to see what you like, what you look at, who you follow, you can go into your privacy settings and turn that off to be to the point where you could have nobody see that information or just friends that you're connected with. The other thing that I would do is turn off all syncing of contacts and connections to other apps. Away from privacy, the last most important thing that I suggest you do is to secure your accounts by doing a couple really simple things. I don't have it listed here, but make sure you have a different password for your social media accounts than you do for other accounts. Like I see Venmo in the chat. You don't want somebody who breaks into your Facebook to be able to break into your Venmo, and vice versa. And then turn on two-step verification. That way you get that extra code to sign in. It's another way to make sure that it's actually you signing into your accounts, not somebody else. And then the last thing you'll see in these settings menus is something that's called manage devices. And what's great about this is you can see if somebody else is signed into an account, or if you stay signed into your friend's laptop, for example, you can sign yourself out. And it's a good way to make sure that other people aren't accessing your stuff. And I think that's it for today. Like I said, I'll make sure to share out some links. I'll send them over to the Public Citizens team so they can share that out with all of you. And I think that's it for me. I'm not sure if I'm handing this back to you, Pablo, or if I'm doing the
Yeah.
introduction.
Yeah, no,
Anyone.
Thank you
Gotcha.
so much.
thank you so much, Eric. So, again, it's my pleasure to introduce the next speakers this evening, and
Pablo, before you do that, we're going to do a poll real quick. So sorry. We want to find out how much people are interested in May Day thus far. You heard a little bit about it from Jesse Sharkey. Apologies. But now you've had a minute to think about it too. Are you going to be coming out for May Day? Have you checked out maydaystrong.org? Have you seen if there's an action near you? If there's not, are you thinking about hosting one? Let us know and we can follow up with folks who are potentially interested. And we'll give this another 15 seconds so we can get to our main presenters that we're also excited to hear from for our deep training of the evening. All right, I'm gonna wait till we get to the halfway mark. We're at 800, just about 800 participants live right now, plus all the people in the 45 live trainings that are together locally, which we love and we encourage you to do next time. Bring a friend, invite a spouse, invite a neighbor. It doesn't have to be huge. It's great if you want to do that. We'll support you either way. All right, so we have 45% of you are planning to attend that replied, and 39 probably can't host. So maybe you're waiting for those of you who might consider hosting, 52 of you to post your events, and then they'll have that opportunity. So thank you all so much for participating. And now I'll hand it back to Pablo. Sorry for the interruptions.
No worries. So it's my pleasure to introduce our next speakers this evening. And so thank you to Tamika Middleton of the Women's March and Niall Blass of the League of Women Voters. Take it away.
Hello. I think I'm just waiting to be spotlighted, Tamika and I. Or maybe we'll just go to the slide that starts us so we can get started. Oh, hi, Tamika.
There we go.
And we're locked in. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I hope you're doing well. You know, troubling times, but also empowering times. I'm excited to be holding this space with Tamika, with Women's March and, League of Women Voters, Women Power, right? Women Power Democracy.
Yes.
And so what we're here to talk about today is building to critical mass locally. And so we're not just talking about having your network of friends and opportunity, but when it comes to showing up at the state level, the local level, at whatever level you need to, how are you building the relationships that allow you to do it, not just once, because hands off is amazing, but we need several dozen hands off to get us through this moment in our democracy. So how do we create the opportunity to do that? So going to the next slide, that was just me giving some context. We wanted to give a little 2 minutes for you all to really just be thinking about some of the core questions that come with this training and what we're hoping to achieve. I'll try to speak up, Thomas, without yelling in my workspace, but I will try to speak louder. But what we really want to ask you all is—
We can hear you.
Okay, great, because I was like, let me yell. Okay. But basically, think of a time you've made a new friend and think about what you did. And one thing that says, when it comes to that conversation, whether you were friendly, whether it was your neighbor and you said hi, what did you do? And what's that one thing, that ability that you can then bring into meeting new people? Because so much of this, yes, it's power building, base building. We have so many things that we call it in organizing and advocacy spaces, but it's really relationships. So feel free to share in chat, but also share in your groups for those of you who are in person. What strength do you bring to meeting new people? And I know I handed off to you after this slide, Tamika, but I'd love to hear from you for this little 2 minutes. What do you think you bring to meeting and engaging new people?
You know what? Anyone who's ever been on a Women's March, mass call and has been in space with me know that I try to bring a level of authenticity to this space. I am a natural jokester. I have every pop culture reference in the planet in my brain. And so whenever we're in conversation, I try to bring all of that, bring my full self to the space. So I think that's really, that's one of my strengths is sort of being very true and authentic and relatable. How about you?
Thank you. Yeah, listen, right? I think it's also being said a lot in the chat, but that authenticity, right? It's like, obviously, when you're talking about certain issue areas or you're going into different communities, cultural competency is important. But what people need to know aren't just your issue areas and who you voted for, they need to know you. And people can like you across lines that are geographic, that are cultural, that are economic. Who you are is the only commodity that you can take and pick up and put elsewhere. So that's something that I always try to hone. Just who am I and how do I present that to other people, whether it's in the really hyper professional spaces or in the more fun little trainings to save democracy spaces like tonight, right? So with that being said, I'm happy to hand it off to you, Tamika, for the next slide. That's empty, but I think the one is—
I don't know what happened. There we go. All right. All right. So we start from ourselves. What do we bring to the table? And really, like Niall was saying, getting to know who you are. A lot of people talk about that sort of story of self. You start as just one person who has a very particular and unique and valuable point of view and valuable experience. And so we start at this place from our lived experience as just one person. You can go to the next slide. But the problems that we have are bigger. right? They're not, did you see that there's so many things I know we talked about earlier. Kaden was talking about SAVE Act and all of these things that are happening. We have big problems, problems that feel so big often that they feel too big for us to tackle. They can feel overwhelming. And so it's not, you know, it's not, I don't want you to feel saddened or disheartened by the fact that these problems feel overwhelming. It's totally natural. It's totally normal. Next slide. And so you might be asking yourself, if it's just me, what do I do? If I am this one tiny person and these problems are so big, how can I even enter? Next slide.
And it's back to me, right? So we wanted people to kind of sit in that, right? So we're not trying to make it overly scary. We're not trying to conflate the problems that are ahead of us, even though they are sometimes severe. But what we wanted to name is that it's not always easy. And to even get to the point of socialization and community building that you're organizing as a formal position or you're holding and anchoring trainings like this takes time. And we have to work through our own insecurities and frustrations around doing this work, especially now. So we're naming a feeling we've all felt. Who has ever felt too small? Too small to bridge the gap, too small to reach out to that new person, too small to send that email to this new organization whose work you've seen in your community, but you don't really know how that first conversation would go. And so you don't have the script in your head, and so you don't do it. So I don't know if I engage with the slide to start the timer or not, but we wanted to just give space for people to unmute in their communities right now to share that, but also to kind of share it in the chat as we're seeing now.
Yes, and I see folks, I see you this morning feeling, someone said Kate said she was feeling inadequate just this morning. And some Laura feeling a bit shy. Absolutely. Too small, too introverted, insecure.
Too frustrated. I think that's been something that I've been experiencing. It's that so much of the back to back and EO and changes and firings is on purpose, right? It's supposed to make us feel disjointed and discombobulated. And so it's hard to feel like I have my foot in the door for this one conversation and now we're having other conversations. And when you care about the work, you want to care about and carry it all at once. So some of the frustration in feeling too small is I feel too small to hold it.
I see this Cynthia saying that feeling not courageous enough. And you know, it reminded me of a quote that I read today, and I can't remember who it's by, but it said that cowardice is not the purview of the powerful. And so our work is to build our power so that we can recognize and feel and live into our power. And then we can walk away from this feeling of not being courageous. And so I encourage you, and hopefully through these trainings and through the work that you're doing outside of the trainings, in between the trainings, that you're building that sense of power, building your personal power, building your community power, your collective power. And we can overcome that feeling of not being courageous.
Closing out, people are naming it. Sad for the US. Yeah, just feeling it because you're a person. I'm in law school right now too, right? So it's also not just seeing what the things are, but when I read the Supreme Court, it frustrates me to know what they're saying and low-key to feel like they ain't saying much. As it relates to our democracy and our rights. So there's so many ways to feel disempowered, and I'm happy that people are doing it. Ooh, that was aggressive.
Oh, that alarm is serious.
But with that, I think we can go to the next slide. So in acknowledging some of those frustrations and just what we're feeling, we want to name this prayer, right? And so it was said actually by a realist theologian who was watching the rise of Nazis in Germany. And so it's God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And here's something that we talk a lot about. We can't do it all. Each individual person, there's fights around immigration, there's fights around Medicaid, Social Security, the voting rights, the ballot boxes, local, state. There's so many things that are pulling us in so many directions, and all of it is directly implicated to us. And for some of us, it's even implicated into our intersectional identities. So while you can feel the impact of many things and the responsibility of many things, not one of us can save democracy. We can't do it alone. So that means we have to focus. and not just focus on how we build relationships and connections that allow us to do work together, but also focus on the strengths that we bring into the relationships and coalitions we build. There are some of us who are logistics. There are some of us who are messengers. All of that is valuable to the work. So if everybody carries what they can carry, then nothing's left behind. And I think that that's the best way to think about this work. Relationships are accessing a network of resource and power because people are power. The more people you know, the more businesses when you need to vend you have, the more spaces we need to protest you have. When you need people to be housed out of town, you don't just have the hotels, you have people's homes. That's what carried the civil rights movement, right? So much of what was based in the Black church in that work was relationship. So that's what we wanted to name. That's kind of the power of the work that we're trying to share with you today. Knowing people is gaining power. So going to the next slide.
So there's things for us to be up to, right? In this moment, when you feel alone, you feel small, then there are some tasks for you to take up. The first one is get with others to act. The second one, pick some actions. It won't be everything, but do something, right? The third is connect different groups to grow your power. Now, I love this framework, and I'm going to offer y'all something, okay? I'm going to offer y'all something that I have only shared in public one other time on my Facebook page, and it is kind of silly, but it is connected to my pop culture references. People in here might know of the poet laureate DMX. And DMX has a song. I have a theory, and I call it the DMX theory on taking action in times of crisis, okay? DMX has a song, and it says, stop, drop, shut them down, open up shop. That is how I think about how we take action, the process of what we're up to in this moment. First step is stop, take a moment. It is overwhelming. There's so much happening. But before you jump to action, take a pause actually and see if you can, one, get in your body, and two, actually make sure that the information that you are taking in is real, is right, is accurate, is not misinformation and disinformation. We know there's so much misinformation, disinformation in the world right now. So step one is stop. Step two, drop into community. Find some other folks to be with your family, your church members, your loved ones, your book club, whatever it is. Drop into community. See what you can build to protect, to save yourselves, to take care of each other inside of community. And then the third one is shut them down, open up shop. Take action. What is the action you can be up to? Can you be out in the streets protesting? Call your legislators, whatever that is that you're going to be in. So first, take a second. Make sure that you are pausing to make sure you are assessing, that you are in your body, that you are not acting out of anxiety, that you are not acting from a place of stress and from a place of disenchantment. Then find some folks to be with in that moment, to build some things together in your community, and then take action. So that's I'm offering it to y'all, putting in the atmosphere. That's my DMX theory. Okay, we can go to the next slide.
And we kind of wanted to flesh out some of the ways that you can do this. And one thing that I explicitly wanted to name in this slide, and then also in the next one, since it's related, is a lot of the work that we can feel is most productive is that which is directly connected to democracy. So if I'm doing voter registration, if I'm attending coalition meetings, if I'm writing petitions, I can see the point A to point B clearly. But when we look at this moment that we're in, we're seeing that some of the attacks are not just directly political. Yes, many of them are, but a lot of them are also to our ability to convene in community with each other in order for us to express thought and express feeling and opinion in ways that don't come with retaliation. So part of the work that saves democracy is the work that we do with each other, are the spaces that we build, not just to be doing the work, but to be finding joy, to be connecting around things that aren't just the destruction of democracy, because that's exhausting. And if we exhaust ourselves, we get outpaced in this race. And this is a relay. We have to withstand it. And withstanding it requires pause, grace to self, and grace to others. So creating an affinity group, right? Gathering people who share your concerns, who have some like-mindedness, but also maybe have other points and opportunities to connect and engage. Potlucks, movie nights, game nights, that employs what I was talking about joy. Especially if you are trying to recruit people, your friends will quickly learn that if every time they pick up the phone, it's for a rally, they might stop picking up. They might want to engage, but it can be exhausting. So also making sure that when you're reaching into your network and you're reinforcing those bonds, again, you're doing it around ways that create joy, that create connection. Book clubs and study groups, things that allow you to really focus and parse through materials that aren't the fight, that aren't the struggle. And then also care calls. A thing that I've been talking a lot about in my work is obviously League of Women Voters. That implies that I care about voting, and I do. But a lot of time in this moment, my first ask isn't even necessarily to ask you to vote. It's to ask you to ask if your neighbor's okay. And if you don't know your neighbor's name to know if they're okay, this is the opportunity to go up to the front door, to meet at the mailbox, to talk in the elevator, and to know them. Because community is what's going to save us. And what sometimes will bring people to the table, and we'll talk about this more later, isn't just the call to action, isn't just the issue that you share, it's that they like and care about you and feel that you care about them. And that moves people in such profound ways that sometimes we don't reach and pay attention to when we're doing political advocacy in the more overt and direct and explicit ways. And then going into the next slide, this is just talking about some other opportunities. And one that I wanted to really name was anchor institutions, right? So again, some of the fights that we're seeing, yes, they're overtly political. Yes, they're targeting the ballot box, but they're also targeting the spaces that people can be in that, for one, like public libraries. When my mom was at work and I was after school and I was not in a rush to get my driver's license, so I couldn't leave campus, the public library was a safe place for me to go. The public library was a place where kids can access science education and book readings that are free and engaging, chess clubs, other spaces. It's a place for people who don't have jobs to go and apply for free. It's a place for people who don't have money but need to access information, can be checking out books and recordings and DVDs for free. It's a place where unhoused people can be for free. It's a place where people can access Wi-Fi in their communities in a safe environment for free. And so if we get rid of these anchor institutions, some of the democracy work we also care about that can be at the front word of our mind also gets lost. So a thing that I'm also asking people is, does your public library need a volunteer? Can you put a library in your yard, like those free libraries that I see in communities that are great? Do you have a mentor network, a YMCA, a big brother, big sister, and do they need more supporters? So that's also a place where you can build community and build opportunity for self. It's filling in the spaces in your community where some of these restrictions and funding and opportunity and grants are denying us at the national level. But then also we have the Join the Minute of Us, which is a space for those who might be engaging in our work through faith, because we have to have a coalition that for everybody. Because if we look at the opposition, they have a very diverse group of people who want to do harm to an equally diverse group of people, right? So we have to create opportunities for people to feel seen, to find values in ways that can be humanist, that can be religious, that can be anything that centers community and people, and some of the compassion and the hope that we're trying to forge in this moment. And then obviously, League of Women Voters, Women's March, Public Citizen, insert. You have wonderful activist organizations and networks that are giving you opportunities to hands off, that are putting together what's happening in May, all these spaces where you can mobilize. And so I know that we have several of those organizations on the call. So even as we transition from this current slide, if people know, even if it's at the local level, right? Something that's based in Pennsylvania or something of that nature, if you want to just put in the chat a Join Us and About Us link so people can see some of what you're raising and what you're doing, that allows people to start checking out all those ways they can be expanding their network. So just wanted to name that and give the opportunity for people to share those opportunities and to share those resources. So going into the next slide, I believe, Tamika, you're holding this Mentimeter for us?
Yes. Continue to drop things in the slide. In the chat, your organizations, ways for people to drop in and jump in. Like Niall was saying, every place, every action you take, matters. And someone in the chat said different groups for different reasons. So yes, get in. We always say on our calls at Women's March, get in when you fit in. So Mentimeter, you got the Menti code, you got the QR code. What we would like for you all to answer, the question we'd like you to answer is, what's one way? It went away.
It said no way, actually.
What's one way that you built community or connected with others in 2025? And just give us a few words, 1 to 3 words, y'all. What's one way that you built community or connected with others so far in 2025? Yes, mutual aid. I love a mutual aid project. Master Gardener.
Discord, listen, I am a little bit of a gamer. Can't
Hey.
be mad at that. So like, yeah, but those are the types of spaces that allow you to go past borders. There are people who you wouldn't meet if you weren't talking about Baldur's Gate or Stardew Valley or Zelda, right? We meet people where they are. And sometimes where they are isn't like the political science chat, because not everybody did the thing that I did, which was study politics my whole life.
I see a few different book clubs up here. I love a book club, potluck dinners. Listen, I was in when I was in college, my first sort of electoral organizing was with this group that was called the League of Pissed Off Voters. And we used to organize politics and pizza and politics and pancakes. And so and it was such a great way for me to get, especially politics and pizza, getting my college classmates in the building, because you know, if college students are nothing else, they are hungry.
You can build your movement just with some free pizza. Not even gonna
Listen, every time. Neighborhood cleanups, I love that. It's such a great way to build community with each other. Different community events. I saw poetry readings. I love this so much. Where are we? Let's
so
see.
many ideas. It's getting harder to read, which is
I know. Church, a few different people at church. People are meeting people at protests. Listen, of course, I'm at Women's March, so we love a good protest. One of the things that we talk about so much is that protests is one of the easiest ways for people to enter, to bring everyday people into the movement. Because what is easier than just walking out to the march? Put your little name on a sign. I love that. Was that in San Francisco? No, I was actually in New Orleans, but yes, we had Leagues of Pissed Off Voters all over the country. I was in New Orleans organizing when I did League of Pissed Off Voters, like 2002, 2003, right before the 2004 election, many years ago. Local NAACP chapters, yes, I love that.
Period. Local organizations, that state and local work is going to be like reinforcing some of what we're seeing at the national. Some things haven't happened because your alderman said no, because your state attorney said, I'm not going to enforce it. It's really important to have and create spaces of reliable, consistent community members in positions of power that aren't just all the way in Capitol Hill. Because sometimes the people closest to you in those networks of power are going to be the ones who create the safety nets when national politics fail us. Because they see you for you. They don't just see the map. They don't just see party. The closer you get to community, the more your impact matters, the more they're willing to see and weigh you. So local, state, we got to lock in those spaces. Absolutely.
And I see someone in here said Reddit. I know we were just talking about this with our our base yesterday. Reddit has state, you can go every single state. There's like Amarillo. We organize, we have a base in Amarillo, Texas. There's Amarillo specific Reddit, and we've done a lot of work around the abortion trafficking ordinance that they were trying to pass in Amarillo through that Reddit. And so you can do so much inside of those. Yes, Amanda, who was on the call last night. All right, I think our 3 minutes for this are we didn't start our timer, I don't think, but we're gonna keep it pushing to pass it back to you, Niall.
Yeah, also, this is just for my own edification. I saw somebody say Reddit is compromised. I use Reddit for a lot of quick tips and facts. So put in the chat, I'll look at it later. I want to know more so I can lock in on that. But anyway, we're going to do this share out too for people who are in person, but then also some of the people who are joining us virtually, sharing in the chat. What's one way you can build your community? We just saw so many things people were naming, some of the traditional and expected, some the subversive and new, some of what we had on the slides, some of what you all are naming in the chat and networking with each other to share. Which one of the options that you've seen might work for you, or something that you haven't yet tried that you now want to try? And if you're already doing something that you know is working in your neighborhood, on your block, in your state, maybe in this national conversation that we're in, feel free to name that true. True too. Because, some of this is also being a brain trust, right? Sometimes the best resources for change and opportunity are each other. So there's going to be a body of work that wouldn't have existed had you not turned to the person next to you and shared some of what you did last weekend, or they hadn't caught a glimpse of your message to get the ball rolling in the chat now. So giving space for people to start sharing. I saw the pub. Listen.
Yes, listen. And depending on where you are, that can be a really smart political intervention. When we were doing organizing around the Wisconsin state election, the Wisconsin state Supreme Court election 2 years ago, we were putting stickers and up in like the pubs, the bars are a big deal in Wisconsin. And so we're putting stickers for, up there for people to get out the vote. So that can actually be a really smart intervention depending on where you are.
Game nights. I keep seeing potluck. I know we brought up potluck. I got to get better cooking, and then I can do that one. I might move people away from the movement.
Listen, go to the Publix near you and get you a rotisserie chicken and bring it
Get
through.
a Costco lasagna and call it a day. But no, writing postcards, social service fairs, block parties, again, combining joy with community, with action items and calls to actions is going to be so important. Again, I don't think that we're timing this out exactly, so I'm going to maybe start a timer for 2 minutes since I feel like we've talked our way at least through half before. I feel like. Rebel clowns or protests. Yeah, counter protesting can be a way to engage, right? Showing up, showing force for what you stand for. That's also going to be super important.
And we see the loves that are part of the Red Wine and Blue, and that talk about the wine clubs. Listen, drinking liberally, I don't even know what that is, but it sounds like it sounds in the same family. And we love that. We love that. Oh, that's Wisconsin.
Okay, no.
See, it makes sense. Connection.
You're locked into the landscape, I fear. Singing protest songs, all this other amazing work. Also, I just saw it a few slides down, Korean and Chinese restaurants for if you don't drink, also fair. Like we're being tongue in cheek in it, but we meet people where they are, what they're willing to do. It's not always what we want to do on a Thursday night. It's where the movement and the power and the people are. But we're seeing a lot of amazing recommendations. I know with my timer, we have about 50 seconds left, but I'm seeing other opportunities that people are naming. Getting to know your neighbors, super important. I think we can afford canvassing, super important too, especially ahead of all the state and local stuff that's happening. I know my home state of Maryland has been moving its Voting Rights Act. So there's so much that's going to be moving. That's Wisconsin case but the Wisconsin race we saw, what's happening in North Carolina Supreme Court race. All of that is important to plug into. So I'm happy that people are naming that. But with that, I think we can transition to the next slide. And again, this is reiterating much of the same, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but it's this idea of finding folks. And finding folks does not always have to look linear. It doesn't always have to start in the spaces that are centering politics or centering some of our civil rights and democracy-facing fights. Sometimes you meet people where they are because that's the only way you build it. That's the only way you're able to connect with people. And ultimately, none of the work has to look the same. I grew up in the DMV, so the District, Maryland, and Virginia. There's a certain politics there. There's a certain landscape. We have the metro, so where you're able to actually mobilize people, ask for them to go, is super different than where my grandmother grew up. My grandmother grew up in Oxford, Mississippi, and Taylor, Mississippi. Some of that's rural. My mom's dad's side of the family grew up in Water Valley. I think at this time they have less than 9,000 people. They do have a nice main street, right? But what would work in DC would not work there. Even if the people are aligned on the politics, aligned on the movement, it's just not going to bring them to the table. So honoring the fact that different people need different things and that we don't all need to be under the same umbrella for the same reasons is important. So that's why some of the best work that you do as an organizer is decentering yourself. Sometimes you are leaning on your cultural competency. If you're working in your hometown, you're probably the expert. You're probably the person who understands the map, both the literal and the metaphorical. But if you're reaching into a part of town that you haven't traditionally been able to work with, and you're able to identify community members in that space who have that expertise, you lean into their ideas. You lean into those opportunities. Even what works in person sometimes isn't replicable online. And sometimes when we're doing things online, we shouldn't just be trying to emulate what we would do in person. We should really lean into the unique attributes that come with being in a digital space and making that its own beast and its own animal. So yes, some of these examples are put up. I hope that they're helpful. Maybe they get some ideas sparking, but I wanted to name some of the theory underneath it, which is really going where the people are, even when the people aren't you and they aren't like you. So with that, we can go to the next slide.
So to build off of what Niall was naming, we're talking about outreach and we're talking about building to critical mass. And how I think about how I like to, I am a girl who loves a metaphor. And how I like to think about outreach is really the process of bringing people in is really thinking about it like a courtship, right? The first step is actually meeting people and having an invitation. Your very first step is, how do I find the folks that I might want to bring in? Where do I go? If you're dating, you're like, am I going on the dating sites? Am I going to a speed dating event? Am I going to meet them at the grocery store? Where am I going to meet the folks? So figuring out where you're going to meet the folks and then the approach and the invitation. That's the first step. So how do you think about when I'm out in the world and I'm trying to bring people to my book club and I want to find folks who might like to read, right? Where do I go to find the folks who like to read? And then when I see them, I spot them, I'm like, oh, those are my people. Then how am I going to approach them? And how am I going to invite them to come be a part of this thing that I'm a part of, right? Or how am I going to invite them to come even be in a conversation with me? That's your first thing that you think about. The next step of it is sort of like dating. You're sort of they're coming through, y'all are kicking it with each other, you're feeling each other out, you're trying to see, is this something, this organization, something I want to be a part of for the long haul? So what does that dating look like? How do you curate an experience for the people you're trying to bring in that continues to keep them coming back? That's the whole thing of dating. How do we curate the kind of experience that makes that person want to keep coming back? And that's sort of your in your organizing, your first part is like, how do I meet my base? How do I find folks? How do I build that base? And how do I get them, bring them into the base where they're continuing to come back? And the next part is that commitment. How do I get them now? They're invested, right? They're not going to leave me. We are married to each other. We locked in. So how do I get them from sort of dating to now they're not only a part of this book club. They're not just coming to the book club. Now they're facilitating the sessions. Now they're picking the books. Now they're inviting other people to be a part of it. Okay. So this is how we think about that process and how you should think about as you're building your groups, your local groups, as you're building to mass, how do you think about, one, how do you find your people? What is the invitation that you're giving them? What are you inviting them to in the first place? Then once they've accepted that invitation, how do we curate an experience for them that is inviting, that thinks about what it is that they like? Because nobody want to date somebody that takes them places and you're like, I already told you I don't like the sand. Why are we at the beach? Right? So how do you curate the kind of experience that keeps them coming back? And then how do you get them to lock all the way in with you? And how do you get that? How do you then, once you're committed, continue to give them opportunities to be deeper and deeper in that commitment? Okay. So we can go to the next slide.
Or is maybe Tamika frozen? I guess we'll find out. I'm going to keep talking and I'm going to look at the chat. And if people are saying that it's not me, said Amanda Rivera. So I'll do it. It's fine. And we'll hopefully see her hop back on. But again, we kind of want these calls to be an opportunity for people not just to be talking about theory, but to be applying it, to be thinking about the things that you can be doing after this call, from what we're talking about, from what we're trying to share and learn and engage, that you can share with your community, share with your network, share with some of the people that you have in the room with you. So with that being said, I'll start my own little timer, but thinking about who in your social circle can you invite? So ways that you can be gathering people, and then how you can recruit those people to join you. I can say that what's been an interesting body of work for us at the League is that sometimes, and not even just the League, but just in general, we can view the work that we do as a parachuting of sorts, right? I have my personal network, I have my neighbors and my acquaintances and my friends, and they're in my personal, and the work is to be done out there. I don't necessarily think about or take the opportunities to bring these more personal relationships into the work, not to make them about the work, not to lose the intimacy and care and concern that you have separate from the work into doing it, but realizing that everyone is a part of this fight, everyone is a part of this movement. And when we lean into how we can be bringing in these personal networks where we already have a lot of built-in trust and engagement in truth, where you have people who may not listen to or read an article from another person, but just by virtue of the trust that they have with you, they'll hear something they disagree with that might confuse them. And instead of walking away from it or deleting the Facebook post or doing a lot of the disengaging that we're seeing in this polarized moment, they'll hear you out, because it's not even necessarily about voting rights, it's about Nile. And I trust in like Nile, and I believe that Nile, through all these other relationships and opportunities that we've had to build together that aren't political, that she's not just a liar, that she doesn't mean me harm, that she's not just trying to make me vote for this person she likes. I believe in Nile's sincerity, so I'm gonna hear her out. I'm gonna see what she puts on the table. And so that's kind of the dynamic that we're trying to build out. And so these slides will be available, or the recording will be available after this call. So with that checklist that we had featured on the other slide, we'll make sure that you have access to that. But that's just something I wanted to name when we're considering how we invite people to join our crew. That we're not even just thinking about strangers who are on the street, but some of the people that we already know. How do we bring them into the fold of this movement in a way that allows them to feel seen and engaged and heard? So I do have about another minute and 30 seconds on this timer, but then after that, we want to be sure to have an opportunity for people to, be sharing out in person, since this is supposed to be interactive. And as much as I love so much of what we're seeing on the chat, a lot of what we're trying to facilitate are the people who are in the room together, who are in community with each other in that more traditional sense, and how they're able to share and engage. Also, apologize for, I guess, the slightly messy dismount. I didn't know I was gonna lose my girl. So
I'm sorry, y'all. It's storming here and I lost power for a second. And so I had to quickly get my cell phone hotspot, Wi-Fi hotspot up to get back on here with y'all. It was like all of a sudden it was dark. I didn't know what was going on. But I want to just add to something that Niall was naming. And that I heard people, we had this call yesterday and we have these mass organizing calls, and we get the question all the time that's like, what about my daughter, or what about my cousin who is so overwhelmed they don't want anything to do with politics right now, but I know this will impact them. I know the things that are happening impacts them. And that's really that first conversation that is around how you make an invitation to people and what you are inviting them into, right? How do you have a conversation with someone that makes them feel like the things that are important for them are heard, and the place that they're coming to is a place that they can be themselves and that they can make some impact, right? And so, for instance, if I think about, I used to organize Black domestic workers here in Georgia. And we would go out, we would go to, we would think about that first plight, the meeting, the invitation. Where can we go to find the Black domestic workers? Well, you know what? If we're looking for nannies, they like to be wherever there are story times. So there are story times at Barnes & Noble. We know we'll find the nannies at the story time. Now we go to the story time, we see the nannies, we find the nannies, right? That we have to, how do we approach them? How do we have a conversation with them? Hey, I work with the organization. We are an organization made, by and for nannies, childcare workers. home care workers and house cleaners, and we want to make sure that we have dignity and respect on our jobs. And how do we then invite them into the thing? Oh, I'm scared. I don't want to do anything that could jeopardize my work. How do you make sure that you're having the kinds of conversations, that you're inviting them into something that they can be a part of? So we say, it's okay, girl, you just come out. We about to have a game night. Come through. We're going to play spades. We're going to play dominoes. It's going to be a time to be had with other domestic workers, right? And so you want to think about how you curate spaces that invite people in. And so, yes, so I will pause. I was about to say that, and then the power went out on me. So now I don't know where you were, if people were breaking right now.
I think I apologize to our organizers. I didn't realize there was a timer on the next slide that I think is for this activity.
Okay.
And so I was like, oh, my timer, my little Android timer, that's not even the main timer. So going into this, this is just an opportunity, I think, through Menti to share some of what we were just talking about. How will you invite people to join your crew? So here's our 3 minutes, and we'd love for people to share out on this next activity. And I'm happy you're safe, Tamika. I mean, I remember my summers in Mississippi, you'd be like, oh, I hope not my town. Like, it's bad sometimes. So I hope you're safe.
The storm came out of nowhere. My daughter comes running in the room. She's like, what's happening? Yes, how?
RD, intriguing. I don't know what that means. But you said it with confidence first.
And let us know what you're going to be up to. How will you find your people, and how will you bring them in? And maybe, like Now was saying, maybe it's somebody already in your network. How will you get, auntie who never wants to, talk politics to come in and be a part of this thing? And I know I saw a comment in the chat that said, listen, building furnitures are great, but the threat is a coup. But guess what? We can't fight a coup without the people, right? Part of being in this work is actually relationships and bringing folks in. And nobody wants to fight with people they don't have no relationship with. Nobody
That's the T.
in the struggle. I tell people all the time, I'm like, I want to be in the kind of movement where when we get to the other side of the fight, I still want to be around you. So how do we bring those folks in?
Absolutely. That's why I say it jokingly, but really is that, I think one of my best attributes to the movement is that I'm funny. Because that's disarming and engaging, right? And that allows you to meet people in a way that overly aggressive. And I care about, the joke I always make is that I have to rein myself in even when it comes to the joining of crew. Because I loved politics. I think when I was 12, my mom took me to go see political comedians for my birthday. And I used to watch The Daily Show every night. I was so into it that I had to realize not everybody even wants to have this conversation for me. So I want to augment, because I could talk about politics every day, all the time, if you let me. The good and the bad, because I think it's my passion. But that's not always what brings other people to the table. And what I like so much is that people aren't just naming methodology, they're naming the abstract concepts that undergird, right? So yes, there's all these different things that we can do, but in person, because that face-to-face connection is really important for other people, right? That weekly meeting, those multiple touch points are of relevance too, because a part of what makes people feel like you're transactional is that if you have the lead up into the big march, and then I don't hear from you after, or you knock on the door every week to talk about your candidate, and then when my potholes need to be filled, when other things are happening in my community and I'm not hearing any word on it, and I don't see you in the in-between time when you don't have something you need from me, why would I join your crew? People can tell when you're being transactional. So I just wanted to name that when I see weekly, multiple touch points, that's super important, because that's part of building authenticity. That's why people believe that you're there for the right reasons.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wonderful ideas here. Email, social media, a conversation, meeting at the mailbox. I love meeting at the mailbox, guys. I love everything about that, especially if you live in an apartment complex and y'all got a mail room type of vibe. I love that.
Literally. Many a conversation in the elevator. But I think our 3 minutes are over. So I think we can maybe move on from this, just because we have a lot more content. I don't think we even got to our break.
I think we're
And I wanna
moving
make
up the
sure people have a
break.
Break.
I think we're moving up the break.
We're moving it
Right.
up?
Yes, I think we were in the chat. Oh, making mail art. I love this. I love that. So yeah,
Okay,
so
there
we're
it
gonna
is.
take a break. We're gonna take a break, y'all. Quick 8-minute break. Go, hydrate. Get you a snack and come back and meet us on the other side. All right, friends, welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. So we are going to move because we want to get through the rest of this content as good as possible. So we talked about you being, yes, you are one person, but guess what? You are also part of a social circle. You have a network. You have folks with you and all around you. And so those are the folks really that you want to be thinking about first, just like Now was talking about. So we can go to the next slide. And so your social circle and your group that you are building is in one place. And guess what? You have opposition. And in this case, of course, we're talking about fighting a coup. So we're talking about the right wing. We're talking about fascists. And in lots of cases that can look like a lot of different things. In some places, or in some instances, we're thinking about, you know, what's happening with the presidency and in the federal government. In some places, you're also talking about your opposition being folks in your own local, in your municipality, in your community, school board members, it could be city council, it could be a mayor, it could be a state legislature. But you know that there is a distance between you and your opposition. Yes, come on, Michael Colvin already know when we go on the spectrum of allies. I was going to pass it to Now, who's gonna walk us through it.
Yeah, and thank y'all for rocking with us. We've been on this call for 18 hours. No, I'm joking. It's actually not been. We've been locked in, clocked in. I feel like the conversation has been good. So anyway, next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about that spectrum because I think it's a really helpful way to contextualize our work. And then I'll talk a little bit more about the strategies that are indicative of it in the last slide where we talk a little bit about key lessons. So you have a spectrum of people, right? Obviously, the chattering that we see on social media, the back and forth that we see on the Hill, it's hard to really know where everyone stands. But it's really helpful to put people in buckets. So you have who you are, your group. Sometimes that doesn't involve all your allies at once. Sometimes it's everybody who's pro-democracy. Sometimes you're in the reproductive rights space. Sometimes you're more in the voting rights space. There's a lot of different ways to define group, right? And sometimes knowing who's in that as stakeholders and who isn't in that moment is also really relevant to being able to do this work. And so when it comes to that spectrum, you have active support. So active support are the people who are going to be volunteering for an organization and canvassing to hand out petitions. If there's a town hall, they're going to be there. If there's a vote on the amendment that either strikes it down or puts it up, they're going to show up and they're going to push other people to do it. When it comes to the issue area in question, and unfortunately, when that comes to our opposition, that's a lot of things that are harming trans people, it's harming Black and brown people, it's harming federal workers. They're going to put in the work to accomplish that. And then you have passive support. You might read an article, you might see a newscast. In your conversations with individual people, you might be affirming a worldview. It might be the number of retweets and likes that you have on your X or on your Instagram when it comes to what you actually support. But if it's between a farmer's market and going to this town hall, you might be going to the farmer's market. You might not have the energy or interest to go the extra yard to fight for it. But when you have the opportunity to express an opinion, you do. Then you have neutrality. Neutrality can just be a function of, I don't know enough about it. It's not really on my radar for my day-to-day life. I have 3 kids and 2 jobs and 6 dogs. So I don't really have the bandwidth to really be fighting with you about it, to fight to know more about it. So I'm neutral, but I can be moved. And that's a really important category of person to consider. Then passive opposition is the same reflection of passive support, right? You're kind of into it. You're kind of interested. You'll talk about it. You'll probably affirm it, but you're not at the point of active opposition. So you're not going to go counter protest. You're not going to vote against the amendment. You're not going to ensure that there are pamphlets at your school and all these tables so that people can get information. You're not going to center and act in explicit strategic and organizational ways to move the needle on this issue. And if we go into the next slide, we see a little bit of those arrows, right? So it shows the flow of how that works. So neutral can become passive in either direction. And it's only when you're in those buckets of passive that you then become active, right? So we also have to know that where somebody's starting is really important to consider and where we're going to get them. You're probably not going to get the neutral person to not just attend the rally, but to hold the speaker and to do the chants and the songs and to give a 6-minute impassioned speech about whatever it is you all are fighting for or against, right? That's not going to be their position. But you can give them enough information and enough opportunity to have an opinion. And even just the conversations that people are willing to have about your issue area when they're informed and when they have the power of belief and opinion moves people, right? So we also have to know that some of what we do is incremental, but incremental matters. Where we move people within our relationships and dynamics with them matters. And so that then we want to transition people from that passive to active, right? If you believe in it, if you have people in your community that you identify with, you know, who are impacted by this issue, it's easier to take that person who's passive and say, what if it's up to you to make this matter? What if it's up to you to make this heard at the state and local or the national level? And that's empowering people who kind of have the shared mind, the shame theory, the shared heart to actually act, to be engaged, to be empowered to do so. So that's a little bit about how that shifts and works. And then we can go to the next slide. So what we wanted to give is 5 minutes, but I know we're running short on time. So if it's possible, maybe we can just give 2 minutes of just thinking about whether it's in person or just on a piece of paper that you have for yourself, or even just identifying and shouting it out in the chat where your spectrum of allies are in your social circles. You might have people in your family who you're not going to move them. They're not interested in it. You've already mutually blocked each other on Facebook, right? And that might be the people who are in the active support of what you're fighting against or the coup that we're fighting against, right? But you also might have friends who you've never actually spoken to them about it. You actually don't know where they're standing. So it's important to actually engage them just to see, because you might have a friend you think is neutral. And so you don't necessarily think that you have the bandwidth to move them and to fight for them to have an opinion. But if you actually start the conversation, you find out that they're passive support or passive opposition in either way that benefits your movement. And they might only be passive because they don't have a person like you telling them that here's an opportunity to be engaged. Here's the information that you've been worrying about that's been making you hesitate to actually engage, right? And so I see that somebody named conversation starters. I'll just give one little fun fact about that, and then we can go to the next slide. I really think that I think about incrementalness, not just in the sense of where we move people, but also in how we start the conversation, right? The joke that I always make is that you're probably not going to corner your auntie at church on how she feels about reproductive rights and bodily autonomy, right? That's probably not how you start that conversation, at least if you don't want it to be productive, right? So starting where people are, whether it's maybe a way to frame it in the local context, or maybe you do know they watch a certain channel, so you just ask about what was showing up on that channel that day so that you're able to kind of level set where their starting point is, right? Because we don't want to assume that people know more than they know, are positioned better than they are. And the first thing you have to do is just ask, just to see. And if you need to build up the trust to be able to have those honest conversations, then think about not just what you can be doing to building trust with that person, but also you're not always the best messenger for every conversation. So it might be a person who could be reached if the asker isn't you. And that's also why it's really important for us to expand our relationships and our networks, because the more people we know, the more people we can position to be that asker, to be the engager, because they either have the context, the cultural competency, all that incremental important information that allows them to do it, right? And if you don't have the tools, you can equip. You have trainings like these. They're the conversations you can be having with people who might not be on that side of the argument, but who are comfortable with you, who can give you the honest feedback of, I might not respond to that text if it was about a rally, right? So doing more of that work and having those safe spaces within these networks to trial and error to learn is going to be really important for how you operate within this spectrum. And I think we can go to the next slide. So the key lessons, right? Moving people is a huge win. I talked a little bit about that on the last slide, but even if you move someone who was passive support for something that might be harmful to neutral, that's a win, right? Because that might be someone who went from, I'm going to vote no on gay rights to, I'm not going to bother. And it's weird to think about, but moving people to neutrality such that they're not motivated to do harm is in itself a win. The win isn't always finding the MLK, the John Lewis, and making them the champion of your movement. Just moving people strategically to where on the chess piece of what we're organizing and working, they're either passively benefiting or just not harming is important. So thinking about that is important too. One, we don't have to have every fight and argue with every person. I had to learn that in high school. Any conversation, political argument you want to have, I was locked in, we were going to have it, right? But a big thing that's been guiding my work in this moment, especially because we're fighting so much at once, is I'm only interested in productive conversations. And productive conversations mean that I can hear you and you can hear me. And that with enough time and dedication and good faith engagement, there's a real chance that I can move you into a place to either be assisting in the work or to no longer be doing actively harm, or not to be doing active harm. That's not going to be everyone. And so being able to better identify those spaces, those people who can't be moved, in that conversation that you've been fighting to have for 5 days, you could have moved 10 people who were more in the position to hear you. So not getting hung up on the people you can't move, because we have to be strategic with our time because we only have 24 hours. Have you asked, like I said, don't assume you know what somebody knows. Don't assume that you think you know what they stand for and what position they hold. You can only benefit from information. And in many cases, you find that people are in a place that it makes the work that you hope to do with them easier, not harder. And even if you find out something you wish you hadn't learned and it does in fact make it harder, you then get to go back to the not all. You know enough to be able to move forward and to invest in other spaces. And when you don't know, you ask again. You not just ask that person, but you ask the people in your network who have the expertise or the relationships with these individuals to better inform your strategy, right? Some of this isn't just you have to cold call people into the movement. Sometimes you get to know a little bit about the space and the people in it. You go through your resources and then you put forward your best pitch, because that's ultimately what we're doing when we're bringing people into our network. We're putting forward our best pitch. And then you have to act, right? A group is nothing without action. And that's what I've been really struggling with in this moment, is that we can be excited, we can have our calls, we can have our platitudes, and some of that feeds us, and we have to feed the soul in some regard, right? To do this work, we have to have spaces that reaffirm our commitment, but we have to do the next thing. And when we're engaging people in conversation around the work that we're doing, the conversation has to give opportunities to act, right? And not just the vague act. Like the joke I make is that, we're talking about fighting for democracy, and that's important. But fighting for democracy in and of itself doesn't mean anything. Like, are we saying voter registration? Are we talking about civic education? Are we talking about canvassing? So when you're doing this spectrum work, having in mind the actual thing that you're putting on the table is helpful, because it's very different to make somebody care about an issue and then leave them to their own devices. Then here's the information, here's why you care, and here's how that care can transition into something that actually moves the needle on it. So those are just some of the key lessons that we have for the Ally Spectrum, and we can go to the next slide. And this is my last few before, unless Tamika, you wanted to name this one. I see your name on it. It might just be mine. That might be a misunderstanding.
It's yours. Go, keep going.
Like, I'll be yapping and then I'll hand it off to my lovely co-host. But relational organizing, look into it. There's so many resources at the league and some of our partner organizations. But for some of you who are asking, what are the conversation starters? How do I actually move within my network? This is the strategy that gets you there, right? We're recognizing that people aren't just the issues we want them to care about. They're coming into community with their fullness. And some of that's their private life, some of that's their personal life, some of that's what's happening at home, what's happening in school, what's happening in their favorite game. And really, relational organizing is the tool that allows us to leverage our personal network, right? Not just viewing the work as we're doing as separate from who we know in our day-to-day, but encompassing of them and allowing that shared sense of purpose and connection and value that we've already built through our relationship to allow for us to take collective action. It's taking the networks that we have and that we're trying to expand and actually activating them in ways that move people forward. And so why is that important? Next slide. This is part of when I try to be candid. If you can give a fire speech and you move everybody and they captain my captain, that's really great and amazing. And sometimes people are doing that. Sometimes the rallies And the marches that we do are the spaces to do that. And when you're a successful messenger in that regard, you're able to move a lot of people at once, right? When you're at hands off, you're typically shoulder to shoulder with people who are already locked in on this issue with you, right? But sometimes that's not what's going to bring people to the table. Sometimes what gets people to do the thing, the votercade, the voter registration, the petition, the tabling of the event that you're doing for voter education, all these other things that we've been doing in this fight for democracy, it's just because they know and like you. And that might not be what's sustainable to keep them in the movement alongside you, but that opens the door. And so when you're creating these spaces and these relationships, we also want to remember that we're not making it a die-hard, zero-sum loss of either they're fully locked in step with you and know what you know and believe what you believe, or they're not a part of it, or I trust you, I'm here, I'm willing to learn specifically from you, and you use that, right? So that's what I want to say. It's just like, I think sometimes we discount the importance of likability, and that's really what saves the work sometimes. Because if people trust you, next slide, you get to be a trusted messenger. And so again, I know we're short on time, so I'm not going to take too much of it, but we have our spheres of information, right? There are things that we trust to let us know that something is maybe happening in the news or happening in politics, but that's very different from being a space for a person who I think the actual information on how I should feel about a thing or what I should do about a thing is, right? And the closer someone is to you, the more weight the words that you use have. I could have a newsletter with 5,000 people and I can reach out to them, and that's great. But if you know 10 people that you can text right now for your local action or mobilization, and they're going to answer, and you know, because of the relationship and the trust that they have with you, they're going to say yes. Sometimes that 10 is more powerful than my 5,000, where 2,500 might read the email and only like 500 click the link, right? And also, again, recognizing that you're not going to be this person to everyone. And that's why we do what we can when we can. That's why we focus on expanding our coalition so it's as diverse as the problems that we face. Because sometimes someone's just going to look at you and trust you to say something about it, but they're going to trust somebody else in your network to help them make decisions. And so the more people you have, the more resources you have to do this work. So that's just something I'd like to name when it comes to why these relationships matter, why it's informative of our work. And with that, I think we can go to the next slide.
All right, I'm gonna hit it. I'm gonna hit some things. I'm gonna hit it fast. I'm gonna hit it quick so that we can pack in a few more things for y'all real quick, okay? To the point that that Now was making, right? Part of how we have these, how we build these relationships, especially with people who we don't already know, is through what we call relational conversations. Also, people call them one-on-ones. And there are 4 parts of a relational conversation, or a one-on-one, or one-to-one, or however people, lots of different language around it. The first part is the purpose. Please go in letting people know why you're there. Don't let people think that you're there for one thing and what you're really there is to get them come out to your event, but they think you're there because you're trying to offer them some support. You know what I'm saying? Like make your purpose clear, okay? Because we don't want to mislead people. We want to bring people in, right? The second is exploration. This has to be an exchange, it has to be a conversation. You have to be curious about the other person, right? You can't just be like, let me tell you why the fascism is wrong, right? You have to be curious about the other person, because guess what? Just like them knowing about you and liking you is what brings people in. You knowing about them is also what helps you continue to bring them in, right? Just like we talked about when we're talking about the courtship slide, right? You have to get to know things about them in order to understand what motivates them. So you have to be curious. The second part of your relationship conversation has to be you getting to know and understand what motivates the person that you're talking to. What are the things that they're interested in? This person might not be motivated just by voting rights, but they might be motivated by the fact that they have a sick parent who they're struggling to cover childcare, or covered medical care expenses. They might be motivated by having a child with disabilities. You need to understand what it is that their underlying motivation is. Then there's an exchange. Can you offer them resources? Can you connect them to things that might support them? Can you share a story about how you've overcome some of those things, right? And then the last thing, and the thing that a lot of us walk away without having when we have these conversations, is a commitment. You want to get them to commit to something, friends. Have them walk away. If that's their commitment is to give you their contact information, that's wonderful. If they are committing to come to your book club, that's amazing. If they are committing to show up for a protest, whatever, do not walk away from the conversation without getting some kind of commitment. It could just be for a follow-up conversation. Okay, go next slide. And so the question is, how does all this fight against the coup? How is all of this conversation we're having lead us to the place where we can fight against what we are seeing coming or happening actively? Next slide. So I have a few quotes that I want to offer. And I saw someone in here earlier mention that they are leading a book discussion on tyranny. We got a quote from On Tyranny in here, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century about how to fight tyranny. This quote says, "For resistance to succeed, 2 boundaries must be crossed. First, ideas about change must engage people of various backgrounds who do not agree about everything. Second, people must find themselves in places that are not their homes and among people who are not their friends." So what I want to say about this is the question that people are asking in the chat around, is it hopeless to talk to Republicans? Guess what? We have to build a big tent. We have to be in organizing work with folks who may not have all the same points of agreements with us. We cannot fight this thing without people and without people power, right? We have to be in the work of bringing each other together. The number one, organizing 101, the first thing I learned is that we meet our people where they are and we bring them along. So that question around being curious, if we can understand what motivates people, even if they don't agree with us on everything, we can bring them in, okay? And we don't have to be besties, but we have something that we can fight for together. We have a common cause and we can find that and identify it. The second quote that's up here, you see that handsome gentleman in the left-hand corner, that is Kwame Ture, formerly known as Stokely Carmichael. I come out of the Black organizing tradition, so I show so much love and respect to this elder, this ancestor. One of the things he says is the world will change when people stop waiting on someone else to change it. We cannot wait just because we feel like the problem is big and overwhelming. Just because we say we don't know who else in our community is out there fighting. We cannot wait. And then there's another quote I didn't put up here, but I'm going to read it to y'all real quick because it moves my spirit and I feel like it fits. He said, "The job of a revolutionary is, of course, to overthrow unjust systems and replace them with just systems, because a revolutionary understands this can only be done by the masses of the people. This can only be done by the masses of the people." Next slide.
And again,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
yours?
No, that's you. That's you. Go ahead.
Okay, let me back up. Nah. But no, anyway, so again, we're speed running because all of these resources are going to be made available to you after this call. And I want to respect your time because you're locked in till 10. So 400 of you are caring about this movement, but I also know you're tired. So in this article from Choose Democracy, they named 3 things that we want to center, right? We have to get with others, which we've already talked about. We want to pressure a pillar of support, and then we want to devote ourselves to a long-term project. So these movements, these rallies, these marches, they're important, but that's not where the work stays, and that's not where it gets done in completion. So going to the next slide, I just want to give some context around when we're saying these pillars, this is what they are. So sometimes we have the false notion that power flows from the top to the bottom. There are those who are in positions of power, and then there are the rest of us. And so we're competing with the pressure that they're enforcing us and what they're like bringing down onto us, right? And in some ways that can be true, right? Like if you have a federal government that is not protective of your freedom of speech, of your access to the ballot box, some of that power is coming down. But in reality, there are pillars of support, and that's what we can target. And pillars of support are essentially the institutions that are maintained, that allow our society to function as it currently does. And so if you want to influence society, you identify and focus your efforts on these institutions. They can't be completely dismantled, at least not in a short period of time, but the more you weigh on them, the more you pressure them, the more you see change. And so some of those pillars are bureaucratic, when we're talking about calling our reps every day and writing them letters. Some of them are economic, when we with our dollars and we say, hey, if you're not supporting this, if you're not acknowledging the diversity that makes our country amazing, then I shop elsewhere. You also have relationships, just interpersonal. You have educational, right? So that if you're banning books, I'm going to make sure that I provide books to my children, to my network of family and people, so that we can ensure that they have that information. So those are the pressures that we put on. And then we can move on to the next slide.
Kyle, are you okay for us to jump all the way to the last question we have for participants?
Hello, I chatted that. I feel like people are already so locked in. Feel free. I'm not married to it. It's fine.
We have great content. I hope everybody looks at these slides, but this was Tamika's suggestion. I think it's a good one.
Yes, I thank y'all. Like Niall said, thank y'all for rocking with us and for being here until 10. It is late. And so we don't want to keep y'all too long. We got through the bulk of our presentation. So I'm gonna move us to slide 69. So we can skip ahead. That one. There we go. So the last thing we want y'all to be in is to invite folks to the next training. Now, we know a number of y'all in the chat were saying, oh my gosh, y'all should have come to the whole series. The last training was great. Everything's been fire. Bring your people. There were 600, 700, 800 people. I don't remember how many people have been on this call tonight, but we need so many more people. We got to keep growing in order to make this happen. So take the next few minutes. We're going to give you a minute and write down the names of 5 people who you want to invite to the next training. And then one of those people, go ahead and hit them up while we're all together and say, hey, friend, hey, next Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern time, there's a phenomenal training. And there are some local groups that are doing it together. And maybe you want to come over to the house and we can participate in the training together. Okay.
And then we can go to the
Ann said she got her 5 already. And I love that.
And also, I'll try to make sure that, especially through the league and stuff, when any of our follow-up, like, we're always looking for opportunities to build power, to engage and put forward partnerships. So I'll make sure like contact information for me is available, just because I think these are the spaces where we elevate our opportunities to engage and to work. And the ways that I can support people's work within the league and in allyship and partnership, I think is always a credit to what we need to be doing with each other beyond these calls, right? So I see that conversation. I don't want to do my email to every individual message. I don't got it. But when the follow-up goes out, I'll make sure that it's available for sure.
Oh, Betsy's inviting the whole coffee group of 20. I love that. I hope y'all get together in the coffee shop, back room, if that's what your coffee shop is organized like, or in community center or whatnot. And come together and make it shake. Cheryl, I hear you. We're both Niall and I think, and Kane and a few of our folks, we're all East Coasters, so we hear you. It is 10.
And I think, wait, hold on. My Canva deck is bugging, so I can't like track where we're going to be next. So if people want to go to the next slide, I can't.
Yeah, we can go to the next slide.
So again, this will be in the slides and the resources we share. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but just a handout to LOL. That's funny. Even my room is tired. My room said it's 10 p.m. But anyway, these are just handouts that help reinforce some of what we're doing. Next slide. Again, more resources just to contextualize the work that we hope that you all are going to continue doing. Thank you so much for being here. I think we're just going to go ahead to our closing remarks, and I'm going to keep it short and to the point. Whether the people who are in positions of traditional power can't or they won't, we can and we will. And instead of wondering why we don't have more person A's, and more person Bs, you live and you engage and you fight so that people are asking, why aren't there 10 of yous? Anything that you hope for anyone on this call to be to you, you can be to the people who are in your life right now. It was never going to be them who saved us. It was always going to be you. And now it has to be you, because if it's not, we don't get it out. And that's where we're at. So I want it to be severe, but I also want it to be empowering. It doesn't have to be us. We could maybe have 1 million calls and it would not be us. It would always be you. And that's what I would want to say in my closing remarks, that if you leave with nothing else, leave with that on your chest. And I'll hand it off to Tamika for yours.
Is she frozen?
LOL, no.
All right. I think it's Kaden actually closing us out.
Go for it, Kaden.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for joining us tonight at the second training for Rise for Freedom. And then next week on April 17th, we'll have our third training, which discusses how to talk to people you might disagree with. So please do join us for that. But before we hop off, we do have a song for you to close out the evening with. And that is Everybody Deserves to Be Free by Diva, is it Mahal and the Resistance Revival Chorus. So Akine, take it away.